Hello and welcome everyone to the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice 2019. At our first offline tournament of the year, the world's elite have gathered as this week promises to show some amazing StarCraft II. In 2018, we had a magical year that culminated in Serral becoming the WCS Global Champion, becoming the first non-Korean player to ever do so. This week, 76 players have gathered here in the ESL Arena at their attempt to end Serral's era and begin a new chapter. At the end of this week, only one player will be crowned champion. It all starts here at the Intel Extreme Masters.
This is the greatest stadium on earth for esports.
Staying at the top is harder than getting there. When all eyes are watching, how would you perform?
Serral overwhelming the airplane of stats, and that is it.
All eyes on the world champion.
Welcome to the Acer Predator pre-show.
A warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's one of the most anticipated fixtures of the entire year for StarCraft II, and we are here for the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice to bring you all the action as 76 worlds are going to collide, gentlemen, and it is time to bring you all of it here for StarCraft II. My name is James Carl. I will be your host throughout the next week. To my right-hand side, in control, Rotterdam and Pig here to start things off. Guys, it's always a magical time being here in Katowice.
I mean, this is one of the absolute best events of the entire year, if not the best event of the entire year, and it's starting off the entire year with, I just said entire year like 4 times, nice. I apologize, it's early. My point is there's going to be amazing players playing amazing stuff, and I can't wait to see if Serral is going to keep being the monster that he was last year. That's my big storyline.
I totally agree. I mean, I think the one thing that really stands out for me in Katowice is the format, man. I went over this like in every tournament that I cast throughout the year. I love this format. I love the open brackets, going into those group stages like a round robin with 6 players, everything is stacked. Then obviously playoffs are always fun in every tournament, but overall, this format as a StarCraft II fan, so much StarCraft, it's impossible not to be excited.
Pig?
Yeah, I mean, we get to see so many storylines evolve here. You get the early stage of the open bracket. We get a lot of up-and-comers and new names kind of having that chance to set the stage. You get such a meaty middle stage, as Kev said. There's just so many games, and at the end of it, there's going to be a lot of memories, a lot of new players making names, and whoever holds the trophy, they get that awesome experience out in the arena, so it's going to be great.
Definitely, and I think that overall, with the brackets that we have, once again, we say this every single year, but it just gets more stacked, and we're here once again here in the round of 76, as our open brackets will determine which of our next 12 players are going to be joining 12 players into the round of 24, which is all important. And unfortunately, we had a few dropouts here and there, including Classic, who cannot be here with us, who was in the final last year, but still, very, very stacked tournament as a whole. Oh,
it's incredibly stacked. And like you said, it has to be said, it's unfortunate, right? Because he was the runner-up last year, and he's just an absolute all-star player, so we'll be missing him. But, again, we were looking at these brackets, and I know we're in the pre-show, we're going to go through each one of them, but my God, it's just like, it's so insanely stacked that even like, some of the players are like, I'm really excited for them this year. Oh, they're facing that monster already in this early round. I mean, some really good players are getting eliminated right off the bat.
I think one of the best things about these brackets as well is that it's not just about the 3 players that make it into the next phase. That's obviously very important, and that's what all of the guys are fighting for. But it's so freaking cool to see that the top 60 at this tournament, not 16, but the top 60 gets paid. And it's $600 as well. I mean, we all know how freaking hard it is to earn $600 online in StarCraft II. You're going to have to beat all the European elite over and over again. So I think this is such a freaking cool opportunity for some of these guys that barely have any career earnings. Here they can walk away. You just win 2 series and you already walk away with more money than you make in most events throughout the year. And I think that's really cool to follow as well.
But what 2 series are you going to win, Kevin? This is like...
I know a couple.
You know a couple?
Yeah.
You think Goblin's going to win his?
Oh,
Goblin?
Goblin Trap. I mean, if Trap takes the map, I'd be impressed.
Pig, your thoughts before we look at the brackets?
I mean, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to just look at the names. We're all kind of brimming with excitement because there are just so many good players, but there's a lot of up-and-coming stories. That's what I got my eye on. I know Kev here, he's a fan of a lot of these young up-and-coming European players, so we've got our eye on them. I think we're always inevitably in such a big open bracket, there's at least 1 or 2 big upsets.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes,
I mean,
hopefully.
Stats didn't even advance last year.
I mean, that kind of says the importance of this tournament as well, that we still talk about Seoul beating Stats in the open bracket last year, where Seoul, the Polish Terran player, eliminated Stats before the group stage even begun. But that says enough about the value of this tournament. It's not just about who wins it or who makes it into the semi-final. No, you have a good showing in the open bracket. We remember it for the rest of the year.
Definitely do. Well, let's take a look at our Group A then, bracket 1 even, I should say, as we do have our players ready to go. And SOS is going to be leading the charge all the way up at the top. A previous world champion here, having to qualify through our open brackets.
And that matchup is already very fun. If you're like a European nerd on the ladder, always is a Ukrainian Terran player, and he likes mech, and he's got a couple of really weird unconventional. I know Jeff. I know.
All right.
Jeff is already giving me the look. No, I'm not gonna say he's gonna beat SOS over here, but as a StarCraft nerd, I'm already excited. I see the very first matchup, and I'm like, I'd love to see that actually.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of funny ones. I think Snoot making a reappearance here. That's really awesome. Facing Ragnarok, of course. And then, we can't mention without saying too much here, but Artos is cheering for Lenok there. He's got a easier round for him, but can he make it through to be one of the 3 to make it out? That's going to be a tough call.
Esports retirements, really retirements, Pig, if Snoot's
you never leave StarCraft. No. People say they're retiring, they always come back. You can try to walk out, but you just get drawn back in. A tournament like this, I mean, it was only a couple of years ago, Snoot was making it through, to the top 4 and onwards and stuff, so he's always going to have a chance to play here. And Snoot's been hitting that ladder hard recently. He's a player with a lot of history. He doesn't have as much stress on his back right now as well. He's coming in with that kind of relaxed, fun attitude. And that's what we like to see with Snoot, because he does let his emotions, get the better of him sometimes. In this case, no stress at all.
That was exactly what I was going to say. I think there's actually a chance that Snoot might be even better now that he's retired. Now, that's a really weird thing to say, but honestly, as Pig said, he's one of the players that beat himself up more than anybody I've ever seen. Like, StarCraft players are hard on themselves, but Snoot was really hard on himself. So it'd be kind of cool.
A match that we're going to be starting with in Group A will be MaNa versus FanTaSy. We'll get a chance to talk about that later on. But a player that really catches my eye in this bracket is Dia, now representing Newbie, the Chinese team, of course. Very prolific in some other esports. And now they're in StarCraft II, representing with the likes of Scarlet Rotterdam as well. So what are your expectations for someone like Dia?
Yeah, Dia is one of those guys I think, perhaps quietly expect to make it through this bracket, right? Like, he's not the guy that we think is going to win this entire event, but you look at a bracket like this, if Dia doesn't make it out, that would be upsetting. But I don't know if he's going to make it out through the upper bracket. It is tough. He's got a couple of very difficult matches, I think, ahead of him, but Dia is one of the top 5-6 Protoss players coming into this tournament. He may not be the overall favorite, but I mean, he's really freaking good.
All right. Well, let's take a look at bracket 2 as well. There is plenty to talk about here in terms of how many players we actually have representing through our open brackets. So let's check in with bracket 2. Showtime up at the top and some very important fixtures. Jeff, I think you were mentioning it for Rotterdam. Very important fixtures.
Many. I mean, once again, the Artos and Ziggy show, we got to give a shout out there. I mean, he's going up against Hero. It's going to be tough, man. I believe that in tournaments, people prepare for your build. So I don't know if Hero knows Ziggy, but that's going to be a fun one. But Scarlet versus Risky, that's one that I'm very excited about.
Oh, geez.
I know we're going to have plenty of ZVZ guys, but I'm a Risky fan. If you talk about people that are hard on themselves, I think Risky is a prime example. He's incredibly hard on himself, but I think he's actually really good. I think that young man is so much better than he gives himself credit for. And of course, my boy Goblin. I mean, come on, there's so many cool players in this bracket.
There's a lot of cool ones. I'm looking at Stefano here, though. He's got Harshman in that first round. Obviously, that's very tough, but it's a non-ZVZ matchup, and Stefano is something magical in the other two matchups. And actually, in a weird way, let's say Scarlet loses to Hero. Stefano actually stacks up really nicely against Hero. He could have a 3 or 4 Protoss run for himself and make it pretty far.
For Stefano, this is a really big tournament, obviously, because I think when it came to the WCS Winter qualifiers that we had online, I think the 2 players that didn't make it that we all thought would qualify were Clem and Stefano. And literally, maybe 2-3 weeks after those qualifiers, Stefano breaks 7,000 MMR for the first time in his career. I know people say, like, that's just ladder, but it's never just ladder. If you get up that high, if you're like rank 1, rank 2 on the European server, it's never just ladder. That really shows that you're in excellent shape. So for Stefano, a very big tournament, but I think there's a good chance we'll see a strong one.
Pig, thoughts?
I think Nurtio in the bottom end of that bracket is someone we can't overlook just because,
Get out of here. You think so?
Yeah.
Nurchio?
Yeah.
All right.
He's
pandering to the locals. I like that. That's a strong move. That's very good.
The audience comes with.
We can't overlook Nurchio, he says.
Nurchio obviously gets. He's gone through a frustrated time with certain matchups recently. He hasn't been doing as well.
All three of them.
But he's going to push. He's going to push through that. He's going to push through that here.
Mate,
honestly.
he's losing to Skillus in round 1. No,
Skillus looks good in WCS.
I'm not even joking.
Skillus looks great, but
Skillus
I think Nurchio, he steps it up when he's on home soil, man. He will actually play a lot better than you're giving him credit here for.
Fair enough, but that's my job, baby.
That's why he's here.
Do. I'm the wild card.
Let's take a look at bracket 3 as well before these guys devour each other. And we do have another 16 players going to be representing throughout. And we see that Classic was replaced by Basio up towards the top. What stands out for you? For me, parting on international soil. You gotta love it. You gotta love it.
He's a fan favorite. He's just he's got one of the most entertaining streams, and of course, despite just the stream, like Kevin was talking about with Ladder earlier, he's also a ton of skill, right? Like parting is actually one of those players that could have some of the best control in the world. But for me, it's Rail Rainer. Like this is 2019. Now Rainer is unglued, right? Like he's going to be at all the WCS stops, going to be at all the tournaments. We believe this guy to be someone that can give Cyril a run for his money as the greatest foreigner. You start here in Katowice. This is going to be a big one. And Rail has been tearing it up. I mean, I don't know that he has a giant fan base or anything like that, but the results are in, and he's always near the top in that European ladder. And he's going to be a tough first round, so I'm really looking at that one.
And just to go back real quick to the esports retirements, are they really retirements? Marine Lord is back, Minato as well. Minato may not stand out, but he also announced a year ago, like, guys, I'm done for real this time. You know, I had a great run in my career, and I was like, man, that Ukrainian Zerg, he really should have done better in his career than he actually did. I know he made it to China once in WSG, but overall, I think Minato is better than his results. Guess what? He's back as well, so I love it. Let's go.
Yeah, he actually, I think he did participate in our previous Intel Extreme Masters Open chat bracket, but kind of went out in one of the first rounds there. So, but as you mentioned, you know, back again, trying to kind of fight against him. Su's another big name pick that's in this bracket, and people expect to go through.
Exactly. I mean, it's Su. He unfortunately, I believe, actually got knocked out by Harstem last year here in the qualification stage. Kind of did a couple of not the most inspired all-ins, and Harstem shut him down hard, and that was a real disappointment. So Su historically normally does play very well overseas. He's done it. You know, he's made it to the finals of IEMs before. He's done really well. I think Su's going to come in swinging. He's been looking very good, especially in Zerg versus Terran in Korea recently. Players, you know, giving Innovation a good run for his money. He's been taking down players like TY in show matches. So I expect Su to bring a high form here.
And someone like Stats here is going to be in bracket number 4. Let's take a look at that, of course, because Stats, as we previously mentioned, was unable to advance from our round of 76 in its bracket stage as a whole. So he's going to be looking for a bit of retribution here. Who else really jumps out to you when it comes to this bracket, guys?
I mean, another one for me is going to be Lambo. I know that I'm kind of riding that foreigner trainer now, but I honestly think it's going to take some of these top foreigners to stop these Koreans from clogging up all of the qualification spots to get to that top 24. But Lambo had an amazing 2018 and was really kind of coming into his own. It's 2019, so there's been a bit of a gap. There's been a little bit of downtime. Not much in StarCraft, mind you, but still a little bit down there. So this is that first big test to see, can you do it offline? Can you do it against these top-tier Koreans?
I'm going to jump to kind of pandering to our audience here a little bit.
Please do. Yeah.
Because Seoul was someone in our previous round of 76 that did impress in 2018.
I think a lot of the Terrans and Zergs are mostly looking at that one in the round 1. Seoul versus Impact, I think, is a really cool matchup. A lot of the Korean fans will say, like, Impact is going to crush Seoul. A lot of the elite Europeans will say, I actually think Seoul is better than Impact. So for me, that's as an innocent bystander, let them fight. I think that's going to be a really fun one. Another one for me personally, I think that's fun, is Hellraiser and Elaser. Because obviously Elaser used to be on Clash, Hellraiser recently joining Clash. I think it's a fun little first round matchup.
Pig, thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. Solar and Elaser stand out as two Zergs. They're both in kind of just the bottom of the top side and the top of the bottom side of that bracket. I think they're both the sort of Zergs who are going to spam Nidus Worms this tournament. And I'm excited because they're both like really, they're one of the few Zergs who've used Nidus Worms before. We've got the rework on that, and I think they're both going to bring it out a lot.
One more very aggressive Zerg in that bracket is Sulir, very young. You could say up-and-coming Zerg player from Spain, but he's also on the aggressive side of things. Let's just keep it at that. So I expect a couple of Nidus networks and a couple timings there as well. It's going to be a fun one, James.
Do you have a rebuttal to this, Jeff?
I'm not. Listen, it's day one, so if these boys want to talk about these players now, let's let them get it out of the way. Right. You think Seoul's better than Impact?
Yes. I mean, I say a lot of the elite Europeans will think that. Yeah.
Do you count yourself as an elite European?
Yes.
And with that, we are going to end. It's time to go to a short break here, ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the full festivities of things here for the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice. Don't go anywhere. After the break, we're going to be starting with bracket number 1, as we're going to go into MaNa going up against FanTaSy.
Think she can't get a last-second clutch? Watch this. Think he can't carry his team while streaming in high resolution? All the while recording a once-in-a-lifetime win? Watch this. Think leveling up only happens in-game? Watch this. On Intel Core i7, they'll rise to every challenge. Now it's your turn. Game, record, stream without compromise on Intel Core i7.
Vodafone presents the pre-match.
Okay.
That's right, it's time as we begin the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice 2019, and we are going to be starting it off with a bang. It's going to be bracket number 1, of course, here, as all of these players have a grueling road to try and get even to just the group stage alone. And we are going to be starting things off with MaNa going up against FanTaSy. Gentlemen, I'm going to talk to you about this match as a whole, because this shouldn't be a first-round match, but it is, again, because the tournament is so stacked.
So much to love in this matchup. Obviously, MaNa here, again, playing for the honor to fight in front of a Polish audience is a very big deal. It's one of his best accomplishments was in Poland. But then FanTaSy is a player that has come back, right? And it's been a few months, but we've seen his skill hit these levels where he's starting to beat top-tier Korean players. He's placing in GSL. He's doing very well. So this is, I mean, we talked about it in the pregame show. It's just really fun. It's like, this is your first round, MaNa versus FanTaSy? Okay, well, it truly is a special event if that's the case.
That is a beautiful hoodie, guys.
It is good.
Yeah, that's all I was focused on over there. No, but I'm with Jeff, but that goes for so many of these first-round matchups, right? Like, there's so many matchups. We're like, wow, this shouldn't be round 1, but it is, because it's IEM Katowice. It's one of the most hyped events of the year. I have no idea what to expect here. I do obviously expect MaNa to come in very well prepared. Like Jeff said, this is not one of those tournaments where you attend, you hope to do well. No, he really wants to do well. Is it going to be enough against FanTaSy? I don't know. Protoss is good against Terran, but I also know that him, on a personal side, actually doesn't love the matchup that much, because there are certain things he really hates about it. So people can say all they want, like, oh, this matchup is really favored for one race. Whether that's true or not, that doesn't matter. If it's bad for one person, that's the only thing that matters for that player in this regard.
Pig?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting match because FanTaSy is an odd player. He plays his own brand of StarCraft. So MaNa does the same. You kind of throw them both and you kind of shake it up and you go, what's going to come out? You know, we could get some very unique games. So I always like seeing different styles. I haven't seen a lot of FanTaSy's TVP, but at the moment we're seeing this kind of odd meta shifts where it's been very hard, lots of all-ins coming out and lots of 3CCs kind of bounce back off that.
With the Ravens.
Yeah, or the Ravens, man. We're seeing a lot of the interference matrices come down as well. If those are landing, it can be absolutely game-ending. So, I don't know. I think this is just going to be a really interesting match. And for me, it's just kind of saying, hey, which MaNa is going to show up? Which version of FanTaSy is going to show up today?
The thing with MaNa as well is that I think in general, he is a pretty aggressive player. I don't mean all-inners at all, because I don't think any of us see MaNa as an all-inner, but he's the guy who's always in your face with like a couple annoying stalkers. It starts off with a Depth and an Oracle, then a couple stalkers and a Prism, and it's so momentum-based, right? Because as long as you can keep that up, as long as you stay active on the other side of the map, this works out great for MaNa. The moment one thing goes wrong, let's say he loses a Prism or whatever, it often feels like it's game over, because from that point on, he loses all momentum. And FanTaSy, obviously, micro-wise, is pretty on point. So I don't know, it's a risky matchup, I think, for MaNa.
Jeff, final thought before I head over?
Just that MaNa always has a puncher's chance. He just, like exactly what Kevin just said, he's good enough that he's not an all-in player per se, but he's willing to just take that lead and go with it and win the game, which is pretty good for him.
As always, here for the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice, we have our laptop set up good to go, so we will be jumping into games throughout here, the round of 76. For now, though, I'm going to be heading over, as we head over back to kind of Pyeongchang, and I go to Todd. Mr. Johan Merlo, my friend. How are you doing? You good?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Excited for this one here. We're going to be playing a new Repugnancy as our first map, and I was asked to talk about it. So let's do just that. We've got our starting positions here. The usual expansion are going to be these ones. Then there's always the question on all of these maps of which third base is going to be taken there or there. So there's going to be that choice every single time. But other than that, there is an interesting dynamic. You know, we talked about potential all-ins and all that. Of proxies, you know, like let's say MaNa was here in the top right. If FanTaSy wants to add some production facilities up there or up there, he can very well easily do that to try and surprise him. But if that doesn't happen, one of the key points might be to be able to sneak those medivacs in. So let's say like if he starts on dropping here towards the main base, and at the same time, let's say if the third base is down there on the bottom right, if he attacks from those two locations at the same time, it's going to be what does the trick a lot of the time for, you know, a lot of these good Korean Terrans to be able to attack simultaneously in multiple places. And of course, the most important of where you're going to be looking at is right down there at the supply, my friend.
Okay, all right.
So make sure to pay attention.
I thought you were just looking at the ticker for a moment there, but thank you very much. Do appreciate that, Todd, as we are almost ready here for our first game, our first series of the day, MaNa versus FanTaSy. I'm going to head over now and bring you our commentary team for all the action. It's going to be Maynard and Benjamin Baker. The Muslim is here as well. Guys, in fact, I'm just going to direct this over to Muslim straight away. Some Terrans are having a hard time, you feel. However, some of the Korean Terrans not so much. What do you think about this matchup?
Actually, if you asked me a week ago, I'd have said very different things. There's a new build out, which is the Raven build, and Innovation's truly been perfecting it. And MaNa's one of the guys that's had a lot of hard times against it in the past week. Like, new meta can evolve and can change at any point in time, but how you deal with the Raven, Protosses are struggling quite a bit, actually.
Maynard, thoughts?
I mean, this is one of the many series that stand out in this first bracket, James. I just can't wait for it. Both players very unorthodox in their styles, and I just want to see them throw down.
All right, well, I'm excited for it as well. I'm excited to be walking around here once again back in Katowice. It's time. Let's bring you the first match of the day.
That's right, guys. G'day, g'day, g'day. Maynard and the Muslim here for the first series. FanTaSy versus MaNa. Oh, man. What are some of your standout thoughts when you just think about MaNa versus FanTaSy here, Demumu?
Actually, one of the crazy things about FanTaSy, I don't know how he's going to play. Like, he's very methodical, very steady. I remember when he moved to Europe for quite a while, he dominated the ladder with just slow but nicely paced games. He's very, very strange in the way that he can throw like a Marauder rush at you, like a proxy Marauder with Hellions and stuff. Game styles that you've never, ever played against before. MaNa, on the other hand, he's always very energetic with his Stalkers. If you attack him or he takes like some probe losses, immediately he's going to be in your face with a Warp Prism, be it Stalkers in it, everything. He will throw everything in the book at you.
There are a lot of Terrans out there that have a very specific way of playing the matchup, whether it be a two-base all-in, a one-base proxy into eventually expanding. FanTaSy is the kind of guy that I feel like for MaNa is going to be a little bit hard to read. Obviously, there's a lot of VODs of FanTaSy out there, especially like from Alima League, from GSL and that sort of thing. And I mean, what's actually cool about this series is both these players have been knocked out of their respective big tournaments. Like MaNa is out of WCS, unfortunately, and FanTaSy also, unfortunately, out of GSL just barely, which means that this is going to be very, very important for them because this is going to start off their year with a bang if they start to do well, or they could, you know, on the other end of the spectrum, have a very unceremonious beginning to 2019.
Honestly, this is going to be one of the closest games within regards to the first matches, just because of how close they are in skill. MaNa's sitting at around like 6.8k MMR on the European ladder, and FanTaSy, he looked pretty sharp in his GSL group despite being knocked out, but he did take Lee Knock with him, so definitely looking good.
Certainly is, and we are inside the first game of Intel Extreme Masters Katowice StarCraft. In the bottom left here, the Korean Terran in the blue. It is FanTaSy. And in the top right, the Polish Protoss. Representing Team Liquid, it is MaNa. I have to agree with Rotterdam. Pretty dynamite hoodie right there.
Definitely, actually. I was thinking the blue just like shines on me, you know? And already something extreme. And this is what we had to talk about FanTaSy. He is a strange player. And this is something that you don't really see that much more in TVP. The Raven build's really grown ever since Innovation just wrecked every Protoss with it. And that's the only build he does, pretty much. So the fact that FanTaSy's whipping out a proxy to start off this series, I love that from him. Given that it is nerves, like everybody's been warming up for this tournament, throwing something like this at your opponent, like what's he going to do? Is it going to be a Reaper? Is he going to fly it into his opponent's base for ghosts and stuff? But already, MaNa's going to know something cheeky is happening on the map.
And MaNa needs to scout the main here. The main on Unit Repugnancy is quite large, and there are Terrans out there where they will hide a facility in the back corner of the main to make the Protoss overreact to a proxy that's not actually a proxy. In this case, MaNa, you know, does his homework, realizes this is a real deal proxy here, so we'll probably be needing to get a Zealot out just to make sure he's a little bit safer against that Reaper, which is going to be coming out of FanTaSy's proxy. This proxy is as proxy gets. It's right up against the lip of MaNa's main.
This is quite nice, though, for MaNa, given that he's seen this SCV, so he knows it's not on the map making a factory. Like, this is a really big deal. So MaNa doesn't have to totally forgo and he actually sees the factory at home here too, so he knows it's not a super duper all-in, and he's played against this before. This is cheeky if he can get this up. Ideally, he just wants the probes to waste their mining time. Doesn't want to lose this SCV though. And actually, the SCV goes down, Zealot's out. This is well handled by MaNa so far.
Yeah, already took a sideblade hit to the face there on that Reaper, so it's taking a little bit of damage, trying to get that probe around. Nice mic control from FanTaSy so far, getting a 1 probe kill, but obviously with a proxy like this, when you get a little bit more than that, 2 probes, not too bad. And the Reaper is keeping itself alive, keeping MaNa, I mean, as soon as the Stalker comes out, this is pretty much over generally. But there is a second Reaper on the way for FanTaSy. With good enough control, perhaps some more probe kills on the horizon for him.
Honestly, when I look at this worker count, this is already good for FanTaSy. MaNa was definitely skipping on probes a little bit, being a bit unsure about what he was against. Also, this is one of the best Reaper maps in the pool right now. If we look behind the natural, once this game gets going, these Reapers can get in everywhere, in every location. And FanTaSy, he's getting some real damage done here.
Well, this Reaper actually might be able to escape if it beelines out of there. Gets a probe on the way out as well.
Really
very nicely done. Very nicely done.
Like, this isn't really a strategy that you'll see on every map, I doubt it. It is purely because it's such a good Reaper map, and MaNa, he's already going to be feeling the pressure. A Stargate follow-up by him, Cyclone already on the way. This could be because Ravens have become so popular. Maybe he's going straight for Phoenix, but most likely, I guess he's going to get an Oracle out for scouting and maybe trying to deal some kind of... Wow! He's just finding every probe on the map, and FanTaSy, he's still got a worker lead, which is unheard of in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, strong start to say the least, and we're just seeing more gateway units here from MaNa. He doesn't seem to be pressuring FanTaSy or anything like that, like delaying his natural. He's kind of just afraid of these Reapers coming back into his main, which he should be, because 2 Reapers handled well by FanTaSy will get, you know, a half a dozen probes here.
And this is that back entrance into the natural. The mineral line is exposed immediately, so this is a beautiful spot to get in. If he kills any probes, it's worth it, but just playing on the safe side here, the Cyclone is joining the fray now. Is that just 1 Stalker alive?
The same off there from the main base. Obviously, the Phoenix could be helpful here to be able to lift up the Cyclone, but it's not here yet.
Oh,
a 3rd Stalker.
I think he forgot to move the Cyclone a little bit extra forward there, lost the lock-on, and Phoenix are the unit of choice for MaNa. Now that, if you find a Cyclone, you pick it up, you deal with it, so he's hunting for that Cyclone right now. And
he's gonna get it.
Yeah, he doesn't want to get caught out, but this, unfortunately for him, is going to be a dead Cyclone.
Yeah, a little bit of a blunder there from FanTaSy, unfortunately. And if he is going to go for something too basey, that does take a little bit of the wind out of his sails as well. We have a Liberator here trying to hide that from MaNa. Definitely wants to beeline towards that main base and to the probe line. This bunker won't be up in time for these Stalkers by the looks of things. So we have to rely on the Cyclone here.
Now, MaNa is doing what MaNa does. He took a little bit of damage, and here we are. Stalkers immediately at the front. He will be able to get a little bit of damage done here. Cancels the bunker as well, an SCV kill. But the real damage, hopefully, will be done at the top of the map here. There is a Liberator on the way. Oh, is he going to get all of this?
And he might take another tank volley here. Just gets out of range of that tank so that all the Stalkers live. Could have been 2 dead Stalkers in one shot there. They're very, very low on hit points.
Where is that Liberator, Maynard?
I think he's just seen it. There it is. Parked right on top of the main base. That cheeky siege up there.
I mean, only 3 probe kills, but this is a lot of lost mining. And 1 Phoenix deals with that Liberator so slowly. Even more.
Oh,
wow.
Easy,
bit preemptive there, bit preemptive.
Yeah, getting a little bit ahead of himself. We got FanTaSy even sending in a Viking up here to the north to try and maybe pick off an Oracle or a Phoenix or something. This is a little bit of weird of a Viking rally for FanTaSy. I'm trying to logic this one out.
By the way, did he have Stim already, or is he just going for combat shields? Because this, no, combat shields first, a reactor on the way as well here. So this is going to be an all-out push with just bio without Stim. This is something that we talked about actually a long time ago. He used to play 1 gas build only, 2 barracks push with factory. He's one of the best guys doing it. Now that he's seen he's against Phoenix, and he's getting a full scout off here is MaNa. Like, he knows exactly what he's up against, which is going to be a 2-base push. Seeing the Widowmine pop out, though, that is definitely unusual.
Yeah, Widowmines don't actually help a ton because it's not really the gateway units that you're afraid of. Oh, we got an Oracle coming in here before any static defense here for the Terran. Going to get a handful of SCVs. Turret's going to be delayed a little bit more as well. Even a Marine pickoff. I mean, the Marines are going to be able to defend this mineral line eventually, but this is pretty nice damage here for MaNa. Now, this push that you're talking about usually has a few boys coming across the map as well for the bunker placements.
You know, this is like watching 2 lightweight boxers that just absolutely go and ham on each other. There is damage being done all over the map by both of them. Very, very chaotic. Now Stim on the way, by the way. A very unorthodox order of getting his upgrade. So combat shields, then Stim. We have 3 racks on the way.
I actually kind of like MaNa's situation here. Oh, actually eats a Widowmine there, but doesn't lose the Phoenix. Phoenix just take a couple of Widowmine hits to go down. I like that he's getting straight to Extended Thermal Lance Colossus here. They're going to be very, very good against this heavy Marine-based army of FanTaSy. He doesn't have that many tanks, and he's getting Widowmines, which Colossus is going to be pretty nice against.
Honestly, whenever you go for a 2-base push like this as a Terran player, you're usually ahead in supply quite significantly, be it like 10 to 20. But now we have Colossus on the way, we have Phoenix out on the field, and he's actually caught up in workers, he's ahead in supply, ever so slightly, but that is a big deal. Stim, by the way, not even halfway done, so there's no way he can do anything with what he has right now.
And MaNa knows it's going to grab his 3rd base on location here and just start to spread out naturally as a Protoss. Yeah, everything looks pretty regular here for the Polish Protoss, and he's just going to try and get the Terran as delayed as possible. Unfortunately, that Oracle is dead.
Oh, and that's always a bit of a wound. Yeah, that was a nice catch by FanTaSy. It was 2 Widowmines, by the way, so he was hoping that Phoenix flew by, but honestly, getting an Oracle, that's worth it too. Oh, this is really nice by MaNa, noticing that there was 2 little blips there. Oh, loses a Phoenix for the process. You know what? 2 Widowmines for an Oracle and Phoenix, that's a trade you take as a Terran any day of the week.
Absolutely. With FanTaSy waiting for the Stim, which was a little weird because we kind of expected the push just with combat shields and maybe some bunkers here with an SCV pool, but with him waiting for Stim, this means MaNa is not only going to have 1 Colossus, he's going to have multiple Colossi. The Phoenix count's going to be replenished, and he's going to have this potential 3rd base to warp in as well. Means that FanTaSy has to decide where he wants to attack. I don't know if he has a strong enough army to be able to pressure both bases at once.
We're going to see, because that supply lead is growing. MaNa did just warp in, and he is throwing up a 3rd behind this, so this is the very, very standard 2-base push from the Terran while taking a non-committal 3rd. But MaNa, he's going to be defending this as best as he can. The Colossus is under fire from the tanks. And by the way, there's no shield batteries here, but the Immortals running forward, taking out the tanks, the Phoenix chasing down, and he holds quite easily.
Not even a shield battery inside. MaNa just face tanks this army, pun not intended, and just burns down those tanks. It looked a little bit dangerous there. The Colossus got quite low, but pulled back to defend in time. And now FanTaSy, that army supply lead that he had, completely evaporated. MaNa now with a slight lead here, but it's just looking great because he's got that 3rd Nexus a lot earlier. You know, his probe count's quite nice. And he can hit in that late game. I'm surprised he's not, like, getting a double forge and powering into upgrades right now.
I was just about to say, Maynard, this is when MaNa can start to feel a lot more comfortable. Now that he's denied the 3rd, actually, maybe he just has to get back home. There is no... The ball is in FanTaSy's court. He has to deal damage, and yes, that's exactly what MaNa does. So he's absolutely... He knows what he's doing in this game.
Feels bad, man.
Yeah, he just has to defend, has to be calm, has to be calculated, because it's his opponent that has to make the moves now. And look at this, beautiful defense behind the natural, good defense at the 3rd. Also blocking at the top with the Phoenix, so he is looking for drops because he knows that FanTaSy has to do something. Double Forge, Twilight, air upgrades on the way as well. He's feeling very comfortable.
I think he's going to be looking to get that Colossus and Phoenix count up really high here to make it very, very tough for the Terran, who already doesn't have a convincing amount of bioforces, doesn't have a convincing amount of air forces either. There hasn't been any Liberator harassment followed up from the initial start of the game here for FanTaSy. His ability to get into the probe lines is basically drops.
Absolutely.
And if the drops get shut down, then MaNa is free to just make probes all game long.
This is always a heartbreak situation for Terran. Like, do I make Vikings? Do I make Liberators? You need Liberators to deal with the ground army, but you also need Vikings to deal with the Colossus. And what do you do to protect yourself from the Phoenix? This is why, and look, this is a big army now. 4 Colossus, that is a lot of firepower. Double Forge will be pumping out upgrades very soon too. And this army of FanTaSy, while it is scary and can catch MaNa off guard, MaNa's just growing at a phenomenal rate now.
And you mentioned he's got these extra forces sort of split up around his infrastructure here to be able to stop any harassment here from FanTaSy, who is just now finishing his 3rd base. So his economy quite a bit behind here at the Protoss. There's the initial drop, but as we saw, there are Stalkers in position for MaNa. FanTaSy going to go for the 1-2 punch here, trying to go for a drop at the natural while hitting the 3rd base with the majority of his forces. But MaNa seems to already be split correctly here. The Phoenixes aren't on top of this drop, but it's only 1 medevac.
Really good map awareness by MaNa, honestly. Like, that pylon being there, these Stalkers aren't going to slip.
Oh, no.
Wow, he doesn't yet have Blink, by the way, because that Twilight Council was reasonably late, just because he was focusing on the defense and such. But now, like, he's held it off. As long as he doesn't take damage, it's not about getting the kills, just don't take damage and he's going to stay ahead.
That's right. And MaNa's going to get even more splash damage here. He's transitioning into High Templar with Storm, and with Charge finishing up, 1-1 upgrades finishing up. He's going to have equal upgrades to the Terran and even be able to shoot ahead shortly here, which is going to become very, very dire for FanTaSy, who's just still been a little bit behind on that army supply and is actually opting to just go straight into air units here. No factory units. He's done with tanks, done with Widow Mines.
One thing that's very surprising about FanTaSy's play, actually, he's totally skipped out on going an armory, which I wouldn't be surprised if we see a big SCV pull at some point, maybe hitting before Storm, because right now it's just all about units. His army isn't going to get any better than it is right now.
Yeah, quite right. The longer the game goes, the easier it gets for the Protoss. It just gets more and more powerful. He has that Twilight Council, obviously.
This is a lot of libs, though, and the Phoenix count has stopped, right? Like, he hasn't been improving that count, so he could get super surprised by the amount of Liberators on the field, which could also technically deal with the Phoenix themselves as well.
Yeah, Liberators actually, if you get enough of them up, are actually surprisingly okay against clumped up air units with their splash damage, but it does take quite a few Liberators for that to happen.
Okay, so MaNa, he's seen what he's up against, right? Which is quite a lot of libs. He didn't see all of them, and he is moving out across the map when his Storm is finished. He's got 2-2 on the way, so he doesn't even need to go now, but I think he's so confident with the Storm, and he's going to try and catch FanTaSy with his pants down.
And FanTaSy is looking here, pulls those Liberators back, eats a big Storm on the fire, though. Oh, man, great Storms from MaNa. FanTaSy taking a ton of damage. This Colossus getting a little bit far ahead of himself.
Oh, this is a great retreat from MaNa, though. He didn't want to move into those liberation zones, and he got the damage done that he wanted to get done. He stopped FanTaSy from even thinking about moving out. But this is a lot of air from FanTaSy. Honestly, his army, I said it wouldn't get better, and that's mainly because of the upgrades, but these air units are proving troublesome.
And he is getting that armory finally, so he's going to be able to get the 2-2 upgrades for the bio, potentially even air upgrades for his air army. And wow, he is actually just making air units. He's got 2 reactive starports, just making Liberators and Vikings.
Absolutely, and how do you engage against this? What does MaNa go for at this point? I would be surprised if we see some kind of Tempest attempt at switching, because that's the old school way of dealing with Liberators, but we'll see what MaNa does. He is getting really far ahead in upgrades now. Like that 2-2, when that kicks in, his army gets significantly stronger. He's getting Blink as well. Let's just deal with the Liberators better as well. He's playing a good defensive game right now. He's just buying time.
Yeah, using a strong composition here rather than focusing on those upgrades, which power to him. And it looks like he's trying to go towards that 3rd Nexus without MaNa seeing it. So far, the Phoenixes are on patrol, but they're looking for drops. They're not looking for a ground army. MaNa attacking in here with a bunch of these Blink Stalkers. Nice Storm hitting a few of those Liberators here, though it all stacked up. Another great Storm.
That is so much damage that's going to be needed to be repaired, but FanTaSy on the counter here, an open 3rd base, and I think he's going to be able to defend this as well, the Liberators.
The Liberator's doing a lot of damage here. The Colossi started standing forward. He is still doing more damage than that natural, but the Nexus is dead. These probes are in trouble as well. MaNa might have overextended here. Can he get critical damage? Similar damage to FanTaSy? I just don't know. He needs to rely on these libs. They're kind of just sitting there at the moment.
This is getting so messy, Maynard. These Stalkers still don't have Blink yet, so they are face-tanking those Liberators. Blink so close to being completed. Both just smashing each other's economy. This is a true base trade here.
What a game 1 for the Intel Extreme Masters.
Look at MaNa's bang.
Yeah,
He's still got so much money. And Zealots?
He needs to get those Zealots out for sure. I mean, they are going to have 2-2 upgrades. They're going to be quite nice and slowing down this bio. These High Templar get killed. One of them gets a Storm off, the other one does not. And, I mean, FanTaSy is not going to slow down here. MaNa is also doing what he can with what he has. Another Liberator escaping, but gets gunned down by those Stalkers, which now have Blink.
Oh, and you know what? If you're playing against FanTaSy in a game like this, you don't know if this is going to be like a FanTaSy GG time. You don't know if he's already dead. You don't know if he's like still very alive, but it does look like MaNa is cleaning this up now quite efficiently. FanTaSy doing everything he can to take down this Nexus.
It's all MaNa.
It's all MaNa. Desperation in the eyes of FanTaSy, and we see him type GG.
Yeah, he knocks out that GG. MaNa getting game number 1. Nicely played there.
MaNa sitting like a little evil genius there with his hands, you know, checking out his knuckles and stuff.
Making the finger pyramid of evil contemplation.
Absolutely. You know, MaNa looking at that game, it's a win, right? But that started off so bad with all the probe kills all around the map. Like, he lost 3 or so at home, he lost 1 on the map, he lost another couple. And I mean, it was a weird build by FanTaSy, but MaNa's going to be feeling very confident. That's the kind of game that you don't go into it thinking like, oh, now I'm definitely going to... No, he was definitely behind from that start, but he made it work. He held off the push very, very easily. He then denied the third, and honestly, his game plan was very good. He knew when to back off as well. That's a huge thing in StarCraft, just being patient.
Yeah, that's kind of the big difference between the good players and the great players is looking at an army and looking at your army and instantly knowing within a second, I can take this fight, and being decisive.
Yeah, just knowing where you're at in a game is a very difficult thing to do, especially when it starts off so weirdly with the proxy opening. And I mean, FanTaSy, I give him credit for opening up a series against a player, especially one that you might not have played too often, with something a little bit cheeky and crazy, because then for the rest of the series, your opponent doesn't really know what you're capable of anymore.
That's right. So FanTaSy showing one of his many hands here that he has in TVP, but of course, he's got a pretty strong utility belt of TVP. Now, I imagine we'll see a new one here for game number 2. It's going to be on Kairos Junction, and it looks like the players need a minute here to Muslim. So...
I mean, that was a very chaotic game.
I mean, I need a minute, but unfortunately it's my job to tell us. It's getting a little bit hot under the collar over here with the action-packed game 1, but yeah, we don't want to delay too long.
Also, I'm happy to see old-school Colossus Phoenix back in action.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people talk about it, how it's just a little bit hard to deal with, you know? It's just, it seems like all of your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, you know? You have your splash damage for the ground, you have your Phoenixes for drops, Liberators, Vikings, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I have to think that, well, Phoenix are very good against Cyclones, right? You can catch Cyclones out on the map, and that is exactly what happened. The Cyclone got caught, and that meant that MaNa could be counter-aggressive and not worry about stuff back at home, despite the Liberator dealing damage. But also the Phoenix are probably going to come back in fashion just because Raven openings are getting so much more popular, and being able to snipe a Raven and shut that down entirely can be very, very handy.
Well, we are loading up at Kairos Junction here. The minute has passed, and MaNa with a 1-0 lead is looking to close this one out 2-0, but I believe in FanTaSy's ability to fight back. I'm hoping for a game 3 here and make the series a real bum clencher. Let's get into it. In the top left here, currently down in the series, the Korean Terran in the blue. It is FanTaSy. Tiny little bit of a guitar shred to start things off with. Get me in the mood, I like it. And in the bottom right here, on match point, it is Team Liquid's MaNa.
That's quite some funky music.
It is a little fun. There's a little bit of, you know, I like the scratch down the fretboard there, you know, with the pick. It's not an abrasive sound at all. Oh, there's that StarCraft II soundtrack. Now, that is a soundtrack I can get behind.
Absolutely, Maynard. So, right now, we already see a very different build for FanTaSy. This is no longer a proxy.
Barracks and a gas as well.
Yeah, so it's not greedy. But, by the way, the new build for getting the Raven, this is purely an innovation change, I guess, but he goes Barracks, he goes Reaper, and then he immediately goes Reactor. Normally, if you go Barracks first, you get a Marine out second after the Reaper. Means you can build your factory as early as possible while doing this. But he opts to delay the factory, get the Reactor, so he gets way more Marines. So that 2-base push is way stronger. So I'm actually excited to see how FanTaSy follows this up, because if we see that Reactor immediately after the Reaper, we know it's going to be some Raven play, Maynard, or at least if this was innovation, you'd absolutely say it was.
Yeah, innovation's been loving those Ravens. It is such a powerful tool for Terran in TVP. And we're seeing the Cybercore before Nexus here from MaNa, so he's not taking any chances against FanTaSy. Doesn't want to get too greedy.
I respect that too, and that is potentially why FanTaSy went in the first game with a proxy build, because then he wants his opponent to be a little bit scared, maybe not go for these fast Nexus, or as fast as possible Nexuses, and slows him down, just making him a little bit more cautious, making him a bit more honest in the series. StarCraft isn't just about one game, it's about a series.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the Reaper on the way. So this is when I'm okay. So it's the Marine play. So it isn't going to be the crazy innovation build, which I'm a little sad to see. But there we go.
A switch there. All right. Cancel the Marine, get the reactor instead.
And this is what this is also another thing. It's such a new build. Making that Marine has been so instinctive for like a good 2 years. So the fact that it is a reactor, yeah, I'm already excited. With the build, you get the second gas before the factory. It's all very weird. By the way, he will most likely be able to get that Reaper now with this Adept if he plays it correctly. But that is a very nice hiding spot.
Oh, nice little wall off here of MaNa. You generally see Protos's wall off the ramp, but MaNa's got one better. He's walled off the jump up spot for the Reaper, gets a kill from the low ground.
If you were wondering, team, why you make a wall off like that, that is just to deny things like that can be very annoying. FanTaSy could have actually got out of range a little bit there, but kind of messed up his movement. I saw him shake his head as a result. But here, the Adept can now be aggressive. Oh, not letting the base. That was a nice move. But without a Reaper to worry about, MaNa can be aggressive.
And he sees a lack of Marine, sees the reactor. Might have just caught the edge of that factory as well. And it's just like, just holding this low ground a little bit against the Terran. It's not game ending, but it is annoying. See, MaNa already up 4 workers. The ability to harass MaNa, not really available here for FanTaSy. And also losing the Reaper means he's lost his vision of what the Protoss is up to.
Exactly. So with this build, with the follow-up, you like to switch out the factory immediately for a barracks, you know? You don't like to get the Cyclone unless you're against a Stargate opening. Now, the fact that he has no idea what he's against, he's just getting Adept pressured, he has to make the Cyclone. So these are just tiny little victories that MaNa's getting. But they're annoying. You don't want to play like this.
Certainly not, and MaNa actually is showing signs of aggression here, getting a proxy pylon, resonating glaives as well, which you don't see that often in this matchup anymore. This is something that MaNa's going to try and just looks like he just wants to overwhelm FanTaSy's natural and just completely annihilate his army on the low ground before it gets too out of control.
This is risky though, because this is the build that Terran do where you get as many Marines out as possible. He also has a Cyclone, and he is going to be hunting down these Adepts with this Cyclone. While the 3 Adepts will win, you get to pick one off, you get to micro with the Cyclone now. It's a very different unit to what it used to be. And we see the Raven, double barracks on the way. But MaNa, he's playing extremely unorthodox this game. Also, pro production, not super duper fluid. It feels like, actually, I'm not sure how MaNa's going to handle this because it's a bit indecisive, right, Maynard? Like, we have a shield battery going up for defense. We have way more Adepts on the fray too. It feels like he's worried about things, but also wants to be very aggressive.
It feels weird to go aggressive against a guy that's basically amassing an army on 2 base, though, because you're going to have a ton of units to be able to defend. I mean, look at this defensive position of FanTaSy. It's already got a lot of Marines. The bunker's going to finish as well.
I guess the idea and the hope here is to get in the mineral line away from the bunker and deny mining, if anything.
Certainly, I mean, that is a ton of Adepts. Oh, the front door's down. Oh, okay. Oh, the Adepts are in, so they're going to have to eat some damage here from this bunker. Raven, of course, could auto-turret and help him out against the defense, but there's going to be a lot of SCV damage here. MaNa is doing a pretty good job getting that damage.
This is the big deal here. This is the lack of mining for FanTaSy, and he's already lost 8 SCVs, and MaNa's doing this very... Don't put that... Oh. That, you know, for MaNa right now, this is very all-in from MaNa, though. Although, when I say that, he's at 46 workers behind this. He's getting Blink, he's getting Immortals. He's doing a very good job of macroing at home, and FanTaSy, he's just getting his economy hammered right now, and this is not the end by any means for MaNa. 15 SCVs, soon to be 16, where have they gone? And they're out!
Damn, I mean, not the end for MaNa, but potentially could be the end for FanTaSy here. That was a very potential game-ending movement for MaNa. I mean, obviously, FanTaSy is technically alive, but only in the technical sense.
You know what was really beautiful? Oh, wow, I thought he was going to finish that. Do you know what was really beautiful for MaNa too? He killed that Adept. So there was no chance he could not get out of the base. So that was something very pivotal. 5 gateways on the way, no third base. MaNa smells blood in this game.
Yeah, I think he just wants to overwhelm and end it here. Happy with the damage he's done, feeling like the Terran's not going to be able to get a force big enough to be able to stop a giant gateway attack. And I kind of agree with him.
I'm really interested in like this army comp that he's going for. So it was Adepts initially. Now he's going for Blink with lots of gateways. He's got Immortals back at home. Maybe he's slightly worried about the fact that he can't shoot up, so a Liberator could really hold him off. Yeah. That's why he's getting Blink and what have you.
Raven also annoying, but not as annoying as, say, a Liberator in your mineral line.
What do you tech to when you see a Raven? You don't really want to attack to Colossus. I guess the best thing is going for like a mass amount of units and splitting up, so the anti-armor missile doesn't really deal with you that way.
See FanTaSy breaking off a drop here, trying to get some damage done on the other side of the map. And MaNa is moving across the map. He's got a sentry here, the Guardian Shield as well, which is going to help out a ton.
Is he going to see this gateway? This could be a big tell, actually.
He does see it, yes.
So he sees the gateway, and he sees the warp ins too, so he knows that his opponent's going to be aggressive. I'm wondering what FanTaSy is going to be doing back at home, actually. Stopping this aggressive warp in is a big deal, but there is an aggressive warp prism on the map somewhere, and this is a huge attack from MaNa.
Oh, nice dodge there in that second Widowmine. The Raven comes forward, drops an interference matrix on two of these Immortals.
That was sick play with the interference matrix. There's barely any damage left to this army. That bunker is staying alive, and this attack is thwarted.
So far, so good. The Warp Prism as well. He's not targeting down, but it doesn't look like he has the damage output for it anyway. The Adepts warp in. MaNa kind of sandwiched between two balls of bio, though. And the Immortals are putting a lot of damage output here on those mines and those Marauders. Can FanTaSy overwhelm? It looks like just not so much.
Oh, there is so much mana on the field. 19 SCVs go down, 48 workers to 26. This is a horrible situation to be in for FanTaSy. He needs to mine, he needs to get out an army, but MaNa is not giving him the time of day. The Raven moves a little bit forward, it's got no energy. And this is a powerful army, and even Warp Prism Micro to join the fray. You saw that little gulp there, that is the gulp of defeat.
Swallowing the last series FanTaSy. This is going to be MaNa's 2-0s. It's got way too much. The Prism Micro on point, and with this big reinforcement, it's just a game of numbers. FanTaSy cannot stop this army.
And this was actually very well handled by MaNa. The Adepts got to him in the early game. FanTaSy let them in, and GG. MaNa sweeps FanTaSy 2-0, and look at that pure relief on the face of MaNa.
Really nicely done from the Polish Protoss. That was one that I felt like would be a lot closer that series, but seemed like, although game one was quite close up until the mid-game, game two seemed to be all MaNa from the start.
Absolutely. You know when you play a player that does proxy you, is playing a little bit weird, and you just play safe and solid and you get back into it? That first game, that must have been so good for his confidence, because he realized he won a game being a little bit behind. These pros were really annoying. Second game, MaNa threw something at FanTaSy, like it was his turn to throw a weird curveball at him, and he dealt with it so well. We see FanTaSy's just like, man, what was this crazy stuff? I've never played against this kind of build before. And I mean, really, really cool by MaNa to bring something like that out.
All right, well, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, a winner's interview with MaNa. Well, don't go away. We'll see you then.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice 2019. We just had our first match of the day. We saw MaNa taking down FanTaSy. So first of all, congratulations, MaNa. This is first match to kick things off, and what better way to start than taking down a Korean on home soil?
It feels great. I was really nervous about this matchup. A lot of people say like, you can take down FanTaSy, but I played against FanTaSy, I think at Home Story Cup the other day, and I lost, I think 3-0 or 3-1, something like that. So I know he's a very tough opponent, and especially since he's a Korean Terran, it's even tougher because the Korean Terrans are just so much better.
It was a 3-0 back then at Home Story Cup, but 2-0 today. So tell me about the differences.
I was much more prepared this time. I had time to prepare. I think I just got lucky a little bit. I think FanTaSy played a little bit sloppily, and a lot of the moves that I did didn't rely on me being so much better of a player. It was just this best of 3 that happened that made me the win.
And I think DeMuslim was the one that mentioned this, but he was mentioning that despite the fact that you showcased a great PVT just now, it's actually not one of your favorite matchups at all. So can you elaborate a little bit on how you feel about the matchup?
Yeah, so I think skill-wise, I am equal on all 3 matchups, and this is something I have strived for the entire of StarCraft. I always wanted to be equal on all the matchups and feel good about themselves. But I don't feel very comfortable at playing PVT right now. I think especially because Europe doesn't have too many Terrans, so I get the least amount of practice versus Terrans. So facing like a bracket filled with Korean Terrans, or just most Terrans in general, that's a little bit concerning, but I'm still okay at the matchup. I just don't feel really comfortable at it.
And we'll see if you face a Terran later on, but first things first, you have to take down what's likely Lenok. I saw that he was up 1-0. Not sure if that's been totally finished yet, but if it is Lenok, how do you feel about your PVZ matchup?
I had the most practice, I think, of PVZ. I have improved a lot in the matchup, but the matchup also changed quite a lot after the Nidus changed, and just overall like the previous balance patch. So it's a little bit different. And Lenok is a very aggressive Zerg, so he might use some of these strategies. I'll be on the lookout, and hopefully I can bring my A game.
Sounds great. Well, thank you very much, as always, MaNa. Best of luck in that match. And I did receive confirmation, by the way, that it is Lenok.
Okay, let's go, Lenok.
Let's go. Let's go. Well, let's head back to the desk with Colaris.
James.
That's right, it's me, it's time. We're going to be checking in on some of the laptops as well as to results that have happened, come in, as well as maybe some that are going on. Starting with you in control, you had Hate Me going up against Hero Marine, correct?
I did, and the German fans and the fans of Big Gabe will be happy to hear a strong 2-0 for him. He did go mech game 1, battle mech style, a lot of aggression, a lot of fighting, but overall just very good for Big Gabe. And then game 2, Hate Me reached into his pocket of tricks, and Pig was asking for this. We saw a lot of Nidus, but if you want a textbook defense of that Nidus timing attack, Hero Marine's got your back. He put on a performance, and then he made like 12 tanks and won the game.
All right, well, there you go. And he'll be advancing on there into that round of 4 in the upper bracket, of course. Moving on, in control. Rotterdam, you have the Clem versus Keen, which will actually decide who goes on against Hero Marine.
Yeah, it's been a really fun series so far. We are currently in game 3. I mean, I would normally tell you guys, we can go into the laptop and I can show you guys, but we're like 17 SCVs deep into this game, so
not far.
I don't think we really have to jump into game 3, but I can give you a quick rundown of game 1 and 2.
Yep.
Game 1, Clem played mech, Keen played bio, but Clem played an aggressive version of mech. Moved out very early, he got a contain while going up to 3 bases. Eventually Keen broke out, but it's one of those moments where, yeah, you broke out, but can you win the game now? No, he couldn't, and he was just very far behind.
Yeah.
And Clem just kind of took a convincing victory. Eventually it came down to like Liberators and tanks, but it was kind of an unfair fight, right? Because Clem just had way more tools to work with. Game 2, however, Keen is like, yeah, we're not gonna let that happen again. It was an absolute beatdown. Like, Keen really leveled up. I think at one point Keen killed 55 units and lost 7 or something. Like,
pretty good.
Yeah, like an absolute demonstration. He played bio again though. Clem tried to play bio as well game 2. So we're in game 3 right now, but yeah, I would say evenly matched so far. I mean, Clem looked really good game 1. Keen looked incredibly good game 2.
All right, and Pig, I know your game's taken a little bit of time to get into, but now you're roaches deep in Clem versus Namshar.
I mean, I'm getting excited here. Kua has PC issues, so me and Namshar are just hanging out in the lobby. We're just, you know, having a chat with about 10 admins and observers. So yeah, Kua's got some issues with his PC, some tech. I'm not sure if it's hardware or his PC, but Namshar is just kind of twiddling his thumbs right now and waiting for Kua to get his stuff sorted.
Thanks for the update, Pig.
Yeah, thanks, brilliant stuff, brilliant stuff. And that's the 3 matches that went on here. Did you guys manage to catch a glimpse of MaNa versus FanTaSy during all of that?
Yeah.
What do you think?
A great result for MaNa, obviously 2-0, very strong, but it was very MaNa done, right? We're over here kind of scratching our head with some of the weird move outs. His army fights are always so scrappy. Mass Glaive Adepts against Terran in that second game. It's all very weird, and I'm sure FanTaSy is going to go back and be like, He's like, what? What did I just face? What is that? But it works, and that's what MaNa does. And Pig, I think, is the guy that gets the call out here. He said both these guys play off-brand weird stuff, and in this case, if you jumble that all up together, it's MaNa that comes out ahead. A great result.
Yeah, that first game, it feels that MaNa actually has a somewhat decent opening. He lost only 2 probes, and then you feel like things are going well, especially once that first Phoenix picked up that first Cyclone. I feel like 99% of the Protoss players would be okay with just being at home and controlling the game with their Phoenix, because you have a faster expand, you have a better economy. No, MaNa moves out with 3 Stalkers and 2 Phoenix, and to me, that is like the most MaNa thing ever to do, because he always gets stuff done, don't get me wrong. But then a Liberator shows up in your main, you cannot mine of your main base for like 20 seconds or something, because for 1 Phoenix to kill a Liberator takes forever. It's like, why would he do that to himself? But in the end, it worked out. I thought it was a very fun series to start the tournament with.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's uncomfortable playing against MaNa, right? Because he's so hard to predict. He will move out when no one else will. So I think it's one of those things where you could see FanTaSy was kind of like, I need to get a bunker up, but then, Adepts just shade past it in game number 2. It's awkward and weird playing against MaNa, and MaNa always excels when he's got many skirmishes going on all over the map. That's MaNa's style in a nutshell, right? The number of times we've seen him down like 70 supply versus Zerg and making the game look like it's neck and neck because he's so good with his micro.
Yeah.
I want to see more of MaNa kind of bring that out. It's a good way to start the tournament for him, and I like the creativity of the Glaive Adepts because that's so off meta right now.
I thought the build in game 2 was really cool, but I also think it's one of those builds where if FanTaSy would be more familiar with it, I don't think he has to move out after he defended the first time. Yeah, he's down economically, but MaNa's working with 0-0 gateway units, and it's Glaive Adepts and then a couple of Blink Stalkers behind it. That's an army composition that better wins in the next 2 minutes, otherwise you're going to have one of those fights where you kill 0 Marines and 0 Marauders at one point. But since FanTaSy was out of position at one point, it actually allowed MaNa to dive in, and the bunker survived for a while, but FanTaSy just didn't have enough because the units were coming in from 2 angles, and that's not what you want as Terran.
Jeff, you had a thought before we go to break?
Well, just that we're having that nice scroll of results down there at the bottom, and just to make a note on the stream, it all seems like the usual suspects won their matches. The Koreans all won otherwise, all by a score of 2-0. So, of course, fantastic. I think it's Wax Angel doing that stuff down there.
Yes.
So we have our very own Wax on site, making sure that we are up to date with that. And we'll, of course, talk about the matches on these laptops.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's time to go to a short break here for the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice. Our next match is very likely to be Hero Marine going up against an opponent being Claire Marquine coming out from that game as a whole. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, as we will come back to you with more StarCraft action very, very soon.